Chromie is a long-range mage that excels at setting up and executing enormous bursts if the opponents play into her hand. She is very susceptible to having her skill shots body blocked, as well as being picked off since she has no mobility whatsoever. Chromie's trait lets her access her talents a little earlier than everyone else. 2 levels earlier, in fact, which allows her to power spike at unexpected times, and especially early times. This obviously has its strongest effect at 8 and 18, where she will get an early ultimate and storm talent respectively. It's not wildly game-changing since it only has an effect on one hero on the team, which is still definitely annoying, don't get me wrong. Her Q is her bread and butter, being a long-range snipe skill shot after a short delay that deals good damage to the first target hit, and will also leave behind a clone of Chromie that will cast the same spell at 40% damage at the cursor upon the next cast. The clone can also basic attack if the target is within its range. The low cooldown and mana cost makes it an absolute pest for the opponents to have to constantly be on the lookout for, and a great siege tool if the opponents aren't willing to keep her out of range or tank it outright. The level 1 talent for it is a quest that both increases the number of clones and damage dealt by the clones, which is an enormous boost to her burst potential if she can land all 3 blasts on a single target. Gnome Speed Ahead allows for a lot of staying power in team fights, especially considering it doesn't even need to land on a target. Shifting Sands is very strong in the event her other damaging spell is landing often, but it is contesting the other Q talent, Fast Forward, which heavily reduces the cooldown and mana cost of Q if it lands at long range, which makes the ability an absolute spamming heaven. It has a storm talent, Piercing Sands, that allows it to pierce all enemies, which can synergize well with previous talents and prevent the tanks from shielding the healers and backline carries from getting bursted after getting caught. Her W is the only other damaging ability in her kit, which, after a short delay, strikes the ground 3 times in a line pattern and has a little bit of AoE to each hit. The distance between the strikes can't be altered, so there's no chance of hitting 3 times in the same spot if they are caught by a long root or stun. It still works well with her setup identity, but requires a good prediction of the direction the opponent wants to flee to land at least 1 more guaranteed hit. This ability also has a level 1 quest talent, which increases its damage as it progresses, and upon completion, reduces the cooldown and mana cost permanently. Mobius Loop is for those that are confident in their predictions, as it increases the damage dealt in the center of the ability, also adding a heavy slow in the same small AoE. It has no further talents for the abilities in specific, but as I'll explain later, she has many broad talents that interact with a lot of, or at least most of, her kit. Chromie's E is a trap that takes a moment to arm, and then becomes invisible as it waits for her to detonate it with her trait button, trapping any opposing or ally heroes into a stasis for 2 seconds. This is the setup ability for her 2 high damage delayed abilities mentioned prior. The fact that it's stealth once engaged gives a lot of capability to her setup, though makes the ability mostly unusable in big fights, especially against AoE damage dealers, since it doesn't take much to break them if they are visible or become visible from damage. This ability has a small benefit from the last level 1 talent, being a base reduction in the arming time for traps, coming with spell damage and an active ability that reveals an area for a short time. Stealthing the trap faster is definitely fantastic, and coming with the other benefits makes it conditionally more valuable than the other quests it contests. From there, her only other choice is one of 3 level 4, or should I say level 2, talents. One is for movement speed manipulation for targets hit, increase for allies and decrease for opponents, and has some synergy with the rest of her kit aside from just flat out making it easier to land skill shots. The next is armor manipulation, which helps with burst damage, especially when it comes to tankier targets. The last lets her keep more traps out at a time, and also reduces the cooldown by over half, which gives more opportunities to catch opponents, though they are all still consumed when she triggers the trap. Chromie's first ult is a zone that slows all opponents by a stacking 10% every 0.75 seconds while they remain in the zone, stacking up to 70%. It has a constant mana cost while it remains up, and will cancel if she gets out of range or runs out of mana. This ult is really solid for locking down objectives, especially ones that need to be channeled or require standing in a static area to complete. It may not deal damage alone, but a 70% slow is enough to guarantee skill shots on characters, especially ones without dashes or blinks. The Storm talent adds a spell armor reduction, additional range, and it'll persist for 5 seconds after it ends. Her second ult is a targeted ability that will set a 3-second timer on the hero it was cast on, recalling them to the location they were at when the ability was first cast. It also comes with the added effect of abilities cooling down extremely fast while the timer is running. It's a guaranteed hard crowd control ability with good range that allows Chromie to work in that niche of setting up the extreme burst combo, though it is easily countered by the unstoppable effect, which is not on every team, but not hard to come across. Chromie can also be pressured during the timer, so even if she uses the ability on a squishy target and it will go off, the opposing tank can stand directly on top of Chromie to prevent her from hitting the intended target, or even crowd control her through the duration. The Storm talent sets a second timer after the first one goes off, somewhat helping with the problem of dealing with tanks, but she can't have the ability to pierce through the tank in the event she is pressured. Her non-ability talents are generally in line with helping her burst potential, and is somewhat viable due to all of her spell damage stacking additively with each other. A proper greeting increases all of her damage dealt, and it doesn't even have to be from spells, but it is hard for her to trigger this alone without certain talent choices. Here and there is a long-range blink that partially makes up for her lack of mobility, but it has to be done preemptively, like most of her kit. Timeout is a standard self-stasis ability that lasts especially long for her, but won't get her out if she's the only target in a fight. Quantum Overdrive is the Burst Mage's dream ability that gives a long buff to spell power, long enough for a good several casts, especially in combination with Temporal Loop. Blessing of the Bronze is also a long buff, but to movement speed and cooldown rate for her whole team, also very good with Overdrive. All in all, a risky character to be playing in this game, especially when it's easy to get pressured by divers while not having any mobility to deal with them.